today's webinar, Managing Peaks and Disruptions from Reactive Operations to Predictive Resilience. My name is Alisa Silven and I will be moderating today's discussion. I am a Senior Airport Strategic Advisor at NACO, the Netherlands Airport Consultants, and I am working on airport development strategy and master planning projects internationally. So over the past decades, airports, airlines, and also operational partners have become increasingly good at responding to disruptions. But the environment in which we currently are operating is also becoming more complex. So not only passenger volumes are growing, networks are becoming much more interconnected, and operational peaks are becoming more difficult to manage. But at the same time, the industry now also has access to much more data, more connectivity, and more analytical capabilities than ever before. So the question is no longer simply how can we react to disruptions, but the questions are becoming more like how early can we see a disruption coming, what decisions can we make before it actually escalates, and how effectively can we act together. And that is exactly what we will be exploring in today's webinar. Joining me today on this panel are 4 experts, all representing different parts of the aviation ecosystem. And now I would like to ask each one of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves and to explain the perspective that they will bring to the discussion that we will be having today. So George, can we start with you?
Sure. Hello, my name is George Touma. I've been with CETA for 17 years, and I currently look after business development for airports in Saudi. I will be happy to contribute today with the perspective of airports on disruptions and the aspects surrounding airports operations. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Katrina, let's come to you next.
Thank you very much. Hello to everyone. So Katrina Kozanowski, I am responsible for Asia Pacific and Middle East and Africa for commercial for CETA for aircraft. And again, today, I think here I bring the kind of the airline perspective in terms of disruptions. In particular, it's a key focus of the CETA for aircraft business, and you know, again, a key driver of everything that we do. So very much my focus area today.
Thank you, Katrina. Tobias, over to you.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Tobias Pötter, working for ARC. Some might heard from ARC rather from CAS perspective. So we are the developer of CAS simulation software. And from that perspective, I'm looking at the topic more from the airport's perspective, because we are helping airports to build up digital twins to predict passenger flows on the day of operation and the future, which is then used in the APOC on the day of operation to manage the peaks. So yeah, happy to share some practical insights from projects. So we are located in Germany, but having projects around the world, also Middle East, like in Doha or Delhi, Schiphol, Amsterdam, Hong Kong, Berlin, Munich. So we implemented these systems already there, and happy to share some practical insights from these projects. So feel free to ask, connect, enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Tobias. And Rana? Let's hear
Yes,
from you.
thanks, Lisa. This is Rana Al-Kouiz, Executive Director, Business Development and Partnership in Aviation and Logistic Industry. I'm happy to be here today and glad to discuss today's topic with such expert people.
Thank you very much. So we have perspectives from a whole range of expertises in the airport and aviation ecosystem, which should make for a very interesting discussion today. So we would like to start this webinar by looking at the challenge itself, the topic of the webinar. So I would like to ask our panelists, what is becoming harder about managing peaks and disruptions today when we compare to, for example, 5 years ago? And George, perhaps we can start with you and your view on this.
Yes, definitely. So disruptions, let me start with some numbers. So disruptions are costing the industry approximately $60 billion a year. And almost 1 out of every 4 passengers are affected in a way or another. So it's a big problem to address. And the increase in the frequency of these disruptions is due to some external volatility. We have more frequent weather events. We have political instabilities. We have sometimes cyber incidents. All of this combined with a system that's already stretched to the max during peaks, and passengers that have higher expectations and lower level of tolerances for delays and disruptions. But this combination alone does not account for the full picture, because we see that the nature of disruption is fundamentally changing. It's no longer an isolated incident happening here and there. It has a network effect, and it's propagating across airlines, cargo, ground handling, passenger flows, and even sometimes between different modes of transport.
Very clear. Tobias, do you have a reaction to that from your operations perspective?
Yeah, you're asking 5 years ago. Of course, everybody knows back then COVID hit us all, right? So so that was already a quite disruptive scenario. But looking back, of course, the traffic picked up again. Airports are growing, traffic is growing, but at the same time, yeah, huge cost pressure. I think that is seen by everyone in the industry. But at the same time, we have now less operational margins, less infrastructure margins. So it's quite narrow and tight already, what George mentioned. So, and on top, this less reliable world we are all living in now with these internal conflicts, you named it already, George, that is a challenging combination also for the airport operations from that perspective. But at the same time, I want to shed some light on, or yeah, some confidence, because digitalization and AI and technology, of course, opens new doors. So there has never been a better time, I think, to make use of these options to meet the challenges. So I think there is also, yeah, a lot we can learn and try to implement to cope with the challenges that hit us all.
Thank you. That's interesting. And Katrina, I'm also interested in the airline perspective. Do you see similar challenges there as well?
Absolutely. And I think, picking up a little bit as well on what Tobias and George also mentioned. So from an airline side, I think the challenge now is the disruptions, certainly around airspace, is now more constant, right, than it ever has been. So I think we can obviously just reflect a little bit on the last few months in the region as well, and then airspace closures and restrictions, they change without little warning. Rerouting of routes, increasing fuel burn, increasing delays, and these things stack up. And then, on the ground in the airline operations center, you've got dispatch teams having to decide really quickly what needs to be done, but maybe not with all of the information. So I think, it's then, adding on top of that things like, NOTAMs that come through from the authorities. In addition, any sort of weather that's also impacting the operations, and all of these sort of delays are really kind of adding up to create kind of network-wide impact for airlines. So I guess it's really becoming a more of a constant to challenge than it ever has been, more of a constant challenge to manage than it ever has been before.
And Rana, do you also align with Katrina's thoughts? Do you maybe have some insights on what this looks like from the cargo side of things, for example?
Yes, I agree with Katrina. Thank you, Elisa. I think the biggest challenge today is the complexity. 5 years ago, supply chain were simpler. Today, everything is connected. A delay in one place can quickly affect the other in the ecosystem. At the same time, customer expected faster service and more visibility. So managing disruption today required faster decision and stronger collaboration more than before.
So I think that's a very interesting topic that you're also raising, Rana, because what all of you are describing is actually the same trends, but from different angles. So you're all seeing traffic growth, but also increasing customer expectations, operational complexity, and also the common theme in your reply seems to be that the system is becoming more interconnected and by itself also less forgiving of disruptions. And Tobias was also raising a point that the technology and the AI that is now in the lift is also raising opportunities. And I think that brings me to the following question. So despite this increased digitalization and use of technology and AI, why are these disruptions still so difficult to manage in this day and age? Tobias, maybe you can follow up on your point of the previous question.
Yeah, sure. So from our perspective, of course, digitalization means, first of all, data, right? So it's all about data. A lot of data is there. But at the same time, I recall a quote from an airport operator or airport manager. So we are data rich, but information poor. So there is data everywhere. But the question and the challenges, I think, from airport perspective, how to create business value out of this data, right? So if you walk through the terminal, you always see these sensors on the top. You get tracked, Wi-Fi, camera tracking. So every scanner, boarding pass scanner tracks all the data. So there is a huge amount of data which you can make use of. First of all, I think you can draw a picture of the current status. So look at it, what happens, and share this data with all the stakeholders in total. But I think the next step is also to make use of this data to create some predictions for the next hour, tomorrow, and then to be prepared for disruptions. And I think there is also, what we all know, there are data silos. Breaking up data silos means to a certain degree also breaking up human silos. So there are all humans. So there is a huge human factor we also see in our projects. Not everybody is happy to share the data because, you own the data. Nobody should see it because they're in the data. You can detect performance problems and so on, staffing, lack of staffing. So not something everybody is happy to share. So I think a big point is also that you try to get the stakeholders on board and try to develop a journey together with them because you will need them for sure at the end. So that is something we learned with our projects we can share on that perspective.
So there's also a very important factor is collaboration in that sense.
Yeah.
George, what is your perspective on this?
The information is there. There has been significant investments in airports in having airport operational systems, AODBs, or airport management system to store the data, right? And to manage the airport day to day. And even some airports went beyond that and built a data warehouse on top of that to include so many things from the airport, whether it's the sensors, the trackers that Tobias was mentioning, information about the baggage and all of that. The challenge now is how to use this data to make a coordinated decision across stakeholders. Because today we have more visibility, stakeholders have more data, but visibility alone is not resilience. The gap is how to change that into coordinated action between all the stakeholders and not each and every stakeholder acting alone on the information that he has. And this is a journey. This is not something that will happen overnight. And airports are getting there, starting from AODB, airport management, going up to ACDM, going to AOP, and eventually to reach ultimately the total airport management status. So visibility is only the first milestone, but coordinated decision-making is the real transformation we are looking for.
Very nice. Katrina, you also have heard Tobias and George talk about the wealth of data, but also the absolute need for coordination. Does that resonate from an airline perspective as well?
Absolutely, because I think, this is really about the entire ecosystem. So, I think, what we start to see is, that a lot right now presently is sort of like, decisions are sort of being made one by one, right? Or solving issues one by one. And you've got kind of teams sort of responding in that matter. So each sort of decision solves only one part of the problem. So, and if you do that, sort of like the costs keep rising whilst, you're working through the different steps potentially of that sort of disruption. So I think it's again about how to move to a better approach where, again, the data is fueling essentially decisions that are made together across the full network at the same time. So the faster decision reduces the disruption and obviously, you know, then helps to lower the cost. So I think that's really kind of moving away from, you know, solving some of these issues and problems one by one to more of an optimized plan, every resource, every concurrent disruption, and really building on that optimization and all of the benefits that brings.
Very good. So that's also echoing what George and Tobias are saying.
Definitely.
So definitely
Yeah.
the challenge. It's not about the availability of data or the collection of data, but it's turning this data into information. But then do not forget about the next step, turning this information into coordinated action throughout the whole ecosystem, right?
Absolutely.
So
whether it be the airport or the airline perspective, it rings true for both, very much so.
absolutely. So if we move from this challenge to the prediction that Tobias was also briefly mentioning before, what is the earliest signal that tells you that a disruption is coming today? Tobias, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind these two steps, right? So George just mentioned, so the first step is, of course, to make data available, that you have a single source of truth, that every stakeholder has the same view on the whole data. Then you already took a big step, I think. But the real power, or it's getting really interesting if you can transform this current situation into a prediction, right? So, for example, what we are doing with simulation models that reflect the reality, like a digital twin. We let run the day of operation at a terminal and can already foresee and predict bottlenecks that might come in the next hours. So it's not like seeing the signals, but you get already a warning if you create or if you run your operations like you do before, including the maybe cancellation, flight delays you already maybe see in the flight schedule, you can already foresee the impact on waiting times, queue length, and so on, and can take countermeasurements before they even happen. So it's a bit of a mind shift already to see the signals, to see the future, maybe to a certain degree. So that is, then it's getting interesting.
George, do you have anything to add from like a technology or analytics perspective to what Tobias is just saying?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, being able to see the future is amazing, right? No one is contesting that. But why don't we also look after the signals that we have between our hands as we are operating? So a disruption doesn't happen all of a sudden. It's, you know, small deviations, turnaround milestones, slipping, slight difference between the point of view of different teams working on different assumptions. You know, all of these micro deviation, they start to accumulate and to build up, and then they turn into a major disruption. So the challenge, you know, of the operation team is to detect these very early signals. It's way before than a violation of a KPI of a ground handler or a certain stakeholder, to see that, you know, a disruption is creeping in. So we move from reactive management, where everyone is working based on different assumptions leading to this, to a proactive approach, supported, of course, by prediction and pattern recognition that Tobias mentioned.
Rana, my question for you is from a cargo perspective. What would be your earliest indication that a disruption is developing, perhaps in the first small, the micro deviations from the plan, as George was managing, or do you have a different
Yes,
view?
I'll tell you a small story that we had in cargo. We had like different information that we get from different sources, and which each resource we do analysis for each data, and in the end collect all the data together to have the final version of how we can go with this market or different market, which is like taking us a lot of time, almost 3 days to 5 days. This after a while, this lead us to do like a dashboard that help us and collect all the data together and analyze it. And in the future, we'll implement the AI to do the assumption.
So you're really learning from practice and immediately make improvements, right?
Yeah.
So you're all mentioning that, yeah, indeed, like George was also saying, it's not like dramatic signals that appear out of nowhere, but small deviations from the original plan. So it seems that the real value from all this collected data and the information that it gives is really coming from recognizing the disruptions early enough and the signals early enough to actually do something about them before they escalate. So let's assume that all works out and we have identified the disruption early on. Then my next question would be, like, what operational decisions are still made today, even with all this available data and information, with incomplete information? So what can we do better? Katrina, perhaps we can start with an airline perspective on this.
Sure, and I think if you kind of look at from an airline perspective, and maybe it goes back a little bit to what I mentioned, is, you know, making some of the decisions one by one, right? So whether it's to do with, you know, the aircraft and, you know, the crew, passengers, maintenance, sort of each of these elements, I guess, are a little bit suboptimal in the sense that when you look at them sort of individually and then, you know, the time taken to kind of get the right information there. I think, you know, the part that sort of gets missed is, you know, pulling all of this and this visibility, you know, across. And I think here kind of really kind of looks at kind of, you know, the speed to react to that disruption and kind of a network view as well. And then, you know, being able to kind of elevate the decision making in terms of, okay, you know, possible trade-offs. But I think, you know, certainly there's a lot of benefits from really being able to sort of say, well, okay, you know, any one of these items are, you know, areas are contributing to that disruption, right? So how do we kind of then really look at kind of what's the optimal view of the data and then again across the network that allows us to kind of react and make the best possible decision as quickly as possible. So I think for me that's really where, you know, it's about kind of making those decisions together and fast, because they do, even from an airline's perspective, are really, you know, within that, the heart of that airline and that dispatch environment. There are so many different entities, as I mentioned, from crew to the aircraft itself, passengers and maintenance. There's so many different areas from an airline's perspective that have to be considered as well.
That's very interesting, because I'm also trying to connect this to Rana. What does this look like in cargo operations? Does it differ significantly from what Katrina is saying, or do you see similarities as well?
In cargo, disruption management is a good example. When a flight delay, we need to make a quick decision. Do we wait for the next flight to reroute the shipment? Do we use alternative capacity? The challenge is often need to make these decisions before we have a full picture. In operation, waiting the perfect information is not always possible. So agility becomes just important as of information as it is.
George, where do you see technology helping to close these gaps?
That's a great question and a very important one. So basically, as I mentioned, within the airport, the information is there now. But when we start looking at the wider picture, right? You know, the network, or, you know, the other means of transportation, this is where, you know, we are looking at to make sure that the information of the ecosystem is made available to the airports. So let's take an example, right? An arrival flight coming late with a tight turnaround, right? And the airport doesn't know about that until it's too late. Definitely, it's going to have an impact on the whole operation of the airport, the gate allocation, you know, the information for the passengers and all of that. So imagine if you can have advanced notifications, right? Telling you that an incoming flight, from the moment it leaves the departing airport, it's going to arrive late to your airport. So you at least have a window to make the necessary arrangement to minimize the impact on your airport and your operation. So this is an area we are looking at SITA, how to make sure that airports that are part of a network can relay to each other this important information. Then you need to look also at other modes of transportation, because more and more, especially in Europe, passengers are using intermodal travel, right? They come through trains, they come through buses, sometimes through cruise. And you as an airport, you don't have visibility if there's a delay building up on a cruise ship or on a train, a strike is happening, and so on. So if you can use an intermodal data platform that will give you this visibility across the whole intermodal ecosystem, then you as an airport, you can know that I'm expecting some delays for a great number of passengers who are stranded on a cruise ship or on a train. Then you can make necessary arrangements. So we need to move a little bit out of a airport-centric visibility to a true network-wide awareness, whether it's airport to airport or airport to other means of transportation.
So then you're actually taking it even broader than only the airport and the operational partners are in and around the airport, right?
100%, because it's rarely the case where a disruption starts and ends at the airport, right? It starts somewhere else, and the airport has to somehow suffer for the consequences of that.
And it also trickles down into all kinds of different systems and indeed modes of transportation as well. So in the end, when we talk about operational decisions and information that we have, we can use all of that to make small predictions, right? But prediction is only valuable when it also improves the decisions that Rana was also mentioning about. And as all of you were mentioning, none of these decisions, these micro decisions, but also the larger ones, happen in isolation or should happen in isolation. And that's when we come to George and what also Rana was explaining, the need for collaboration in the wider ecosystem. And even if we take it a bit further, George, like you were mentioning, outside of the aviation ecosystem even. So I want to take it back to the aviation ecosystem for now, because how important is it that data sharing and also this aviation ecosystem collaboration is building up resilience along the way? So George, if we can follow up on that from your story.
Yeah, so if we focus back on the airports, I think collaboration is absolutely critical. So we cannot just take a decision that suits team A and then it's going to disrupt the work of teams A, B, C, and D. So a change on a gate allocation would make sense for one team, but it will have a lot of effects on other teams. So collaboration becomes transformational when the ecosystem can evaluate trade-offs, and Katrina mentioned that. And it's very important because we need to have all these stakeholders at the airport common priorities, right? And we need to make the decisions that are serving the common priorities, not just the exclusive priority of this team or that team. And this is where AI optimization platforms really help us, because it's not really easy for a person, a human, to evaluate all of these decisions and the impact on each and every team. But if we inject the AI layer into that, then we can evaluate different decisions and their impact on operations, on capacity, on passenger experience, on revenues, on sustainability. And then these diverse teams can act as one, as a coordinated group on a single option that is serving the common priorities. So for example, you can use AI to say, okay, during peak, I want to focus on operational performance. But during non-peak periods, I want to focus on revenues or on sustainability, right? And this is where the trade-off comes in, right? And it also has to make sense. And of course, we need to have humans at the end to make the final call. So ultimately, the next step of that will be an intelligent total airport management system, which is not just connecting systems together, but helping the stakeholders understand the ripple effects and act more in a synchronized way.
That's fantastic ambition, right? Because indeed, optimization platforms, they can really be an enabler for quick and substantiated decision-making across the ecosystem. And Katrina, from an airline perspective, how important is that ecosystem view for you? And where do you see a role in this platform from this perspective?
Sure, absolutely. And it's absolutely critical because I think, again, just building on what Georgia said here, is that really what we're looking at, how do you come up with sort of one integrated recovery plan that helps you manage that disruption? So, for instance, there is a kind of a delay that's attributed to weather, and maybe that's around 45 minutes, and then separately you also have a separate aircraft that goes AOG, which is unrelated, but somehow you've got an overlapping window. So how do you then look at, what's happening with the aircraft in terms of rotating tails, crew in terms of where they should be in terms of legality as well, maintenance for that that aircraft on the ground, and then, passenger in terms of, recovery options based on the airline's rules as well. So I think there's really, a huge amount here where, being able to bring all of that relevant data together, in that sort of AI solver capacity to kind of one, integrated plan, integrated scenario that's addressing maybe kind of, in this case, both disruptions, coming up with, very quickly what this integrated recovery plan looks like, what the best option is for then, the airline operations team, the OC team, to make the final decisions around that, and at the same time keeping full control of the operation. So I guess, really allowing their value of what they do in terms of really focused around making those final decisions around what is the best option, what is the best recovery plan, and having full control of the operation at the same time. So I think that's one of, I think, the key scenarios and one of the key areas that we're focused on as well in the CEDA for Aircraft business and portfolio, with regards to kind of this AI solver solution, in particular what we call our OCC assistant manager solution.
Very nice and inspirational, Katrina. And Tobias, I'm also interested in your view. What do you see that airports are struggling with when it comes to this actual collaboration across all those stakeholders?
Yeah, because George and Katrina, you already made a valid point, and I think it's obvious, and we all know we need to collaborate more, and we need to share the data. But maybe I can shed some light from practical point of view. When we go to the airports and implement these digital twin models that help them to predict passenger flows and so on, we are really confronted with the truth, let's say this way. So we experience a lot of troubles with regards to data quality, data availability. So everybody who works at an airport most likely knows these kind of struggles. So I really recommend, if you want to take that journey as an airport, you have to get your basics right. So for example, flight number, there are 3 digits, 4 digits, 0 edits, yes or no, IATA 3-letter codes for airport, ICAO 4-letter codes for airports. So do you have a database that is consolidated, or do you have different streams of data that have different formats, different frequency, and so on? So I think that is, simply when you perform the project, you will get confronted with these kind of challenges. And what we see also in our projects, I mentioned at the beginning, so sometimes because we bring together the data, sometimes we are really the first, I have the feeling, to stumble upon some mismatches. And it's a journey, like George mentioned, it's a journey the airport needs to start, and it's a long journey, of course, but we highly recommend to take this first step to get your basics right, build up this data sharing platform, try to collaborate. And then I already mentioned this human factor. We also see you have different kind of stakeholders, and although they are all responsible in the same IT infrastructure or the same airport, of course, they have also different view on what they need, what they want, different interests. there are also some rules and so on. If you have to collaborate with border police and so on, the airlines. So everybody also has a different view on what do I want? Do I want low cost for stuff? Do I want high passenger quality? What do I want? Do I want a high level of security? Yeah, so you need to overcome these doubts and also hesitation. We sometimes see that there is a business change at the airport. And I think this is also a big takeaway for airport owners or airport operators. It's not like somebody comes and installs a software. It's really a business change on the other side. You have to collaborate more. You have to work together. And we highly recommend to really take the stakeholders, encourage them to join, be transparent with the data, with the change as well, because not everybody likes that, maybe to a certain degree. But if you are really transparent and building up some enthusiasm, share your goals, I think then indeed it can be a success to implement these kind of projects and digital twin models to actually see the benefit. So it's a long journey, but it's worth it.
It's
I
worth
agree.
Embarking on it.
I agree.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing from all three of your stories is that the resilience is increasingly, becoming an ecosystem capability, and that the challenge is no longer to optimize individual organizations or viewpoints, but to align decisions and also scenarios and what are you optimizing for per disruption and also per event, to align that these decisions across organizations within the wider ecosystem, right? And I want to take this also to the area we're having this webinar at today for the Global Airports Forum in Saudi. So I'm also curious about the local context and what resilience at this scale looks like for especially the Middle East aviation market. And Rana, I would love to start with you for that.
Okay. For me, resilience is mean being ready for growth. Middle East is growing very fast. We have more flights, more cargo, and more demand. The challenge is to keep operation running smoothly and as smoothly as we grow. We need to be ready to adapt, to respond when disruption has happened, because growth is great opportunity, but it's also bringing new challenges.
Totally agree. George, what does it look like from your point of view?
Yes, of course. So as Rana mentioned, the whole Middle East is growing fast. In Saudi specifically, under the Vision 2030, exceptional growth, double digits year on year. So resilience in terms of scaling will require prediction, will require shared situational awareness, and of course, I cannot stress this enough, coordinated decision-making across all stakeholders very early on. So doing things right, doing things early, and doing things that are serving the common purpose of the teams. And this is really this will be the key success metric. In terms of maturity, I think Saudi airports, big and small, have already started the journey. We already have seen airports deploy an AODB or an AMS and so on. Many airports are exploring ACDM. And of course, the next logical step will be AOP, and then AI supported decision making using intelligent TAM and this type of approaches. So resilience, for me, it will look, it's not reacting to a disruption. It will be adapting the system ahead of a disruption happening.
I agree.
Tobias, as a final one, where do you see the biggest opportunities and challenge as the scale in the Middle East and aviation market is increasing?
Yeah, of course, I mentioned we implement this solution worldwide and also in the Middle East. So, of course, Middle East has a special situation, right? So Rana already pointed it out quite well. So there is a huge growth, the mix of growth, but at the same time, you are facing a lot of disruptions. So when it comes to the growth, of course, you have different kind of growth rates. And also when it comes to disruptions, for example, like we are facing airport airspace closure and so on. So this is a special challenge. And then what we see, what works quite well for the airports is a mix. So a mix of simulation or models that have causality. So that really like a digital twin. You have a replication of the operational system, but combine this with AI logic to really create what-if scenarios, what happens if, because then, of course, AI might fall short. And just as an example, for Doha Airport, we are just implementing the solution. And of course, they were facing airspace closure. And from one day to another, you are facing with a different situation, right? So you have stranded passengers. What do I do with transfer passengers that are locked here? So, and then of course, simulation. What if airspace is closed, nobody gets out, but a lot of passengers come in? Of course, helps to run some disruptive prediction models. Yeah, so that is something we can share, or I can share from these kind of projects when it comes to the Middle East market.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm hearing from your answers that the managing disruptions today, that's one challenge, but especially in the Middle Eastern aviation market, managing disruption while traffic and cargo volumes, but also operational complexity continue to grow. That's a very different and extra challenge.
It's a special situation, yeah, for sure.
So what is the one lesson that you hope the audience on today's webinar will remember? George, can we start with you?
Yes, sure. So I think disruption management does not need more dashboards. It really requires turning the data with the support of AI into fast, coordinated action. So really, if you want to take out one sentence out of everything I said today, please take this with you.
Thank you. Tobias?
Yeah, maybe from my perspective, we discussed a lot of these challenges. It's a crazy world, disruptions, and so on. But what I said at the very beginning, I think there are huge opportunities, and for sure the do nothing scenario is not really an option to keep going like before. So I simply encourage everyone, like George said, to start that journey, get help and build up these kind of models or dashboards and so on to be prepared for the future, because the opportunities are also there at the same time, like the disruptions and challenges grow at the same time with AI, with technology, with digitalization. There are so many opportunities to meet these challenges. So a slightly positive spin.
Thank you for that, Tobias. Katrina? Yes, thank you. And I think, again, it's sort of, building on this as well, is that, the better approach is really when decisions are made together across the full network and at the same time. So these faster decisions will really reduce disruption and lower cost. And I think that's really, where we all as a community want to go.
Thank you, Katrina. Rana, let's finish with you.
Yes. If I could leave everyone with one thought, it would be this. Technology cannot connect system. Yeah, technology can connect system, but partnership connect the ecosystem. Like they are parallel in each other. Like you cannot do like technology without partnership. Real success comes when organizations work together.
Fantastic. To thank you very much. And I think the conclusion of this webinar is that the future of resilience, it is not about reacting faster, but it's seeing earlier and acting together to resolve it. And my sincere thanks goes to George, Katrina, Tobias, and Rana for sharing their insights and their experiences today. And thank you all for joining us today in this webinar online. We hope you found the discussion valuable, and we are looking forward to continuing the conversation in the future. Thank you very much, and enjoy.